See me there and see me.
Okay, good afternoon. So now we are 101. So I will start now and welcome to the first lecture of pathology. We have only 3 lectures in pathology in which I will describe a few common diseases related with head and neck and oral cavity. In this session, I will describe some common lesions which are seen in the oral cavity, and I will not go into much details. I will only try to describe them as we study diseases in terms of their etiology, their pathogenesis, their morphological features, clinical features, and diagnostic workup. That's how we study different diseases, and I will follow that pattern. See these lesions. These are the lesions in the oral cavity. This is ulcer. This is a larger view of ulcer. This is center of ulcer with exudate on the surface, and this is surrounding erythema. Now, first question for you is, you can raise hand, and then Dr. Mice will allow you to respond. You may raise your hands in between during the lecture, and Dr. Mice will allow you, or alternatively you can write your questions in the chat box and I will respond to them towards end. So this is a case of 25-year-old woman who presented with multiple painful ulcers and on the oral mucosa for the last 3 days. So short duration, painful, so they are acute, they are inflammatory. She had history of 2 episodes of similar ulcers, so they are recurrent and which healed after a few days, so they are their outcome is good, and ulcer is shown. What is the most likely diagnosis? So these are the possibilities: aphthous ulcers, HSV infection, oral thrush, a neoplastic ulcer, and Vincent angina. The purpose of this question is to expose you to the diseases which can cause ulcers in the oral mucosa, in the oral cavity, and we will be discussing these causes of ulcers in today's lecture. Now this is a very shallow, very superficial ulcer, and this is on the tongue, and this is on the mucosa somewhere, maybe inside the cheek, and this is the center of the ulcer with exudate, and this is erythema. So more likely some of you have responded, it is as more likely as aphthous ulcers. Yes, you are right, and this is aphthous ulcers. And how does it differ from herpes simplex and oral thrush and neoplastic ulcers? We will see in our next slides. Second question. These are few lesions, names of few lesions which are proliferative lesions and or inflammatory lesions, and some of them can evolve into carcinomas, and which one of them is most likely? So there are more than one, but which one of them is most likely to transform into carcinoma? Any more cases? So these are the lesions: erythroplakia, hairy leukoplakia, leukoplakia, leiomorphic adenoma. Either they present as plaques, growths within the oral cavity, or they present as ulcers within the oral cavity. And then leukoplakia can transform as into carcinoma. There is little chance of pleomorphic adenoma, which is a salivary gland tumor, but most likely is erythroplakia. So we will study these diseases as well. In today's lecture, we will study leukoplakia, erythroplakia, pleomorphic adenoma will be discussed in a next lecture, but aphthous ulcer and hairy leukoplakia will be discussed in today's lecture. So learning objectives for today's lecture are that by the end of this lecture, you should be able to classify lesions of the oral cavity based on their clinical presentation. I'll show you what I mean by clinical presentation. And etiology and clinical pathological features of inflammatory and tumor-like lesions, which are not actually neoplastic, but they are growths and they are known as tumor-like. I will explain it in a few minutes. Risk factors, clinical and pathological features of pre-malignant lesions, which are not by themselves malignant, but they have the potential to evolve as carcinomas or cancers. These are known as pre-malignant lesions. And etiology, pathogenesis, and clinical pathological features of oral cancer. A most common form of oral cancer is squamous cell carcinoma. So we will discuss squamous cell carcinoma. Now, oral cavity lesions can present as three abnormalities: ulcers, white patches, and growths or tumor-like conditions. So can you name some ulcers? I just named for them. So aphthous ulcer, yes, aphthous ulcer, traumatic ulcer, yes. HSV infection can present as ulcer, but it starts as a vesicle, but it can present thrush. So you are there because most of these names are related with your today's PBL. So you should be aware of all these diseases. So ulcers can be aphthous. I will describe them in some detail in my next slide. Traumatic ulcers are self-explanatory. They are solitary ulcers, single ulcers usually, and they are caused by a trauma, direct trauma, or trauma because of some broken teeth or some other frictions within the oral cavity. They are traumatic, and they are treated by treating the cause, by treating the traumatic agent. HSV infection is another common cause of oral cavity ulcers. Although they start with vesicles, I will describe them in a little detail in my next slides. And Vincent angina is, as the name indicates, it's angina. It is extremely painful condition of the oral cavity, and the name is also like tongue twisting, acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. So it is inflammation of the gums. It results in the ulceration of the gum mucosa because of the necrosis, and it is an acute disease because it is caused by acute inflammation. So it is acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis, and it is an extremely painful condition. It is caused by many organisms, but usually it is caused by a combination of Borrelia vincenti and fusiform bacteria. And now these bacteria are part of normal flora of the oral cavity, but they don't cause diseases normally. They cause diseases when a person is either immunocompromised or the normal flora of the oral cavity is altered. So immunocompromised, you can think of some diseases, some patients on steroid, patients on immunosuppressive drugs, patients with diabetes mellitus. But alteration of oral mucosa occur because of the use of a broad spectrum antibiotic. Our oral cavity is full of bacteria. Many of them are anaerobic. There are fungi. So, but they are in an ecosystem. When we use antibiotics, some bacteria which are sensitive to that particular antibiotic, they are killed, they are removed. This results in overgrowth of the remaining bacteria, like Borrelia vincenti or fusiform bacteria. With the alteration of bacterial flora, with the use of broad spectrum antibiotic, they overgrow, and as they overgrow, then they become pathogenic, and then they cause acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. I will not talk about them. Maybe microbiology people will be talking about, because it is more related to organisms. Erythroplasia is a growth, epithelial growth, that is related with leukoplakia, but it is more dangerous, more ominous than leukoplakia. And in contrast to leukoplakia, this appears red and ulcerated. I will show you. Carcinoma also, it can present as plaque, or alternatively it can present as ulcer. And some dermatological skin conditions or systemic illnesses, they can cause oral ulcers, like lichen planus is a skin disease, pemphigus, pemphigoid. They cause ulcers everywhere in the body, on the mucosal surfaces. So they can cause ulcers in the oral mucosa, but they are not part of this lecture. Systemic diseases are not are beyond the scope of this lecture. We will be only discussing local diseases of the oral cavity. So I will discuss later on aphthous ulcer, HSV infection, erythroplasia, and carcinoma. And among white patches, Name some white patches. Okay, so white patches is candidiasis or some forms of the candidiasis which are known as oral thrush. Yes, that is most common. That is the most common cause. Yes, leukoplakia, and so candidiasis, leukoplakia, hairy leukoplakia, and again some dermatological diseases, some skin disorders. They can cause white patches because they can cause patches everywhere in the body and elsewhere in the body, but they will not be included in this description. So we will talk about candidiasis, leukoplakia, and hairy leukoplakia. Now, growths or tumor-like conditions are actually not true growths. They are not neoplasms. They are called growths because they appear as masses. But to differentiate them from neoplastic growths, we call them tumor-like conditions, or we call them reactive growths. When we say reactive, we mean by that term that it is not neoplastic, it is non-neoplastic. It is more likely inflammatory growth when we say when we call any growth as reactive growth. So these are the reactive growths. Two reactive growths are common. One is fibroma and other is pyogenic granuloma. I will describe both. Now again the same ulcer as I showed you in my first. This is a shallow ulcer, and this is a true picture of aphthous ulcers. Although in this picture it is shown as single, but usually they are multiple. So they are superficial, they are multiple because they are inflammatory, they are painful, and they are recurrent. We don't know the exact cause, but they are thought to be related to some immunological abnormality or to some female hormones, because they are more commonly seen in young females, and many a times they are associated with menstrual cycle, with periods. So these are very common in young females, and usually they are associated with the menstrual cycle. So there is some role of hormones, but exact cause of these ulcers is not known. And now as is shown, they are a shallow ulcer or ulcers, and they are surrounded by a red zone that is known as hyperemia, zone of hyperemia. This is an ulcer, and it looks from very aggressive and painful because of its color. And now, although we don't do biopsies for these ulcers, but if we see these ulcers in some biopsies, their inflammatory infiltrate varies. Sometimes they are infiltrated by lymphocytes, so, and on other occasions they are infiltrated by neutrophils. So it can be multifactorial. So different causes may ultimately lead to the same clinical outcome, and that is aphthous ulcers. And now the best part is that they are self-limited, and because they are painful, sometimes they are so painful they require local management, like some antiseptic gargles containing local anesthetics, so things like that. So they are only treated symptomatically. They are not given any antibiotics or any other drugs. Now herpes simplex viral infection, now HSV is of two types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is more related with infections of the oral cavity, while type 2 is more related with infections of the genital area. But because of changing sexual practices, now type 2 type 2 is also becoming a common cause of oral cavity ulcers and oral cavity lesions. So now both are common, type 1 and type 2 in the oral cavity. Now it can present as two forms. One first is primary infection, which is most common, and the second form is a latent infection. Now primary form is usually occurs in children between the ages of 2 to 4 years, and they are usually vast majority of them are asymptomatic. Around 70-80% of them remain asymptomatic without any significant disease. But in 20% of the cases, this infection causes acute gingivostomatitis. Gingivo, again, inflammation of the gums, and stomatitis is the inflammation of the oral mucosa. So they cause acute inflammation of the oral mucosa. And now this is their normal appearance. They appear as vesicles, and then these vesicles rupture to form multiple ulcers, and these ulcers in those children then heal without fibrosis. So without any sequel, without any bad outcome, without any fibrosis, they usually heal automatically. But in some persons they become latent. This virus is neurotropic, so it becomes dormant in trigeminal nerve ganglia, and they remain there, and they can cause recurrent infections, and then it is called a latent infection. Now latent infection is activation of the virus which is dormant in the nerve root ganglia. So with conditions like many conditions like stress, some upper respiratory tract infections, exposure to extremes of temperature, sometimes with menstruation and pregnancy, they become reactive, and then they cause recurrent herpetic stomatitis. I will show you, and herpes labialis, basically involvement of the lips, also known as cold sore. This is picture of herpes labialis or cold sore. They are small vesicles of 1 to 3 centimeters, multiple vesicles, and they also heal without any sequel or without any fibrosis. And this is a latent infection which occurs in adults. And now microscopically, if you want to diagnose HSV infection from the secretions of these vesicles, they are diagnosed from the secretions of these vesicles. Although now with the widespread availability of the PCR, if you want to diagnose them, you would like to diagnose them through PCR, but traditionally they are treated by aspiration of the fluid, and then that fluid is stained, and the cells, epithelial cells, will show swelling. It will show swollen cells with eosinophilic intranuclear inclusions. So they will show viral particles within their nuclei, and as an inflammatory process, these epithelial cells, they coalesce, they join to form multinucleated cells. So and it forms the basis of Zank test. This is a very, you may find this test on some exams. It is Zank. It is actually spelled as TZANK. It is Zank test. So Zank test is the identification of these multinucleated giant cells. This is a multinucleated giant cell. It is formed by the fusion of many epithelial cells, and it shows these eosinophilic. Now this is bluish purplish, and these rounded structures are intranuclear inclusions, and this was used, and sometimes this is used even now for the diagnosis of herpes simplex viral infections. And now for candidiasis, it is more common, again like HSV, it is more common in children, and it involves lips and different parts of the oral mucosa with these whitish lesions. Again, the predisposing factors is immunosuppression, extremes of age, some diseases patients on immunosuppressive drugs, and alteration in the oral microbial flora. So this, as I explained earlier, alteration in the oral microbial flora is caused by the use of broad spectrum antibiotics, which kill some of them. Like in this case, if a broad spectrum antibiotic kills bacteria, then this fungus will overgrow, because this is caused by Candida albicans, and this is a fungus. So it will overgrow, because normally it is prevented by the growth of other bacteria. When other bacteria are killed by the use of broad spectrum antibiotics, then it will allow these fungi to overgrow, and then they form a membrane on the surfaces along the oral mucosa, on the surface of the tongue. But these white patches are different from leukoplakia. They are now there are various forms of this candidiasis. The most common form is pseudomembranous form, in which a pseudomembrane is formed on the surfaces. There are other forms, hyperplastic form, erythematous form, but they are not very common. When it is pseudomembranous, then we call it oral thrush, and it is usually a superficial infection, and you can differentiate it from other white patches by removing it through by a spatula. If you use a spatula and you remove this, you want to remove this patch or plaque, you will be able to remove and you will see inflamed underlying tongue. So these are scrapable white patches as compared to other diseases. Now growths and tumor-like conditions, as I mentioned earlier, this is the most common reactive growth in the oral mucosa. This remains very small. It is submucosal, and it is composed of fibrous tissue, and it usually occurs along the bite line. This is the bite line. Because of the friction of chewing between the teeth, it causes a reactive change. It causes inflammation, and persistent inflammation then leads to fibrosis, and that is the cause of, and it is a reactive growth that is known as fibroma. And the second type of growth is, this is in contrast to this fibroma, which is gray. This pyogenic granuloma is reddish, and it is larger. It is reddish because it is composed of newly formed blood vessels. Now newly formed blood vessels are seen in granulation tissue. You may recall from your POD block that every inflammatory process is followed by granulation tissue, by the formation of granulation tissue. And granulation tissue is composed of newly formed blood vessels, fibroblasts, and some inflammatory cells, some necrotic debris. So this all makes granulation tissue. Now the dominant component of that granulation tissue is blood vessels, newly formed capillaries. Now what happens in these females, and especially in females during pregnancy, because these vessels are lined by endothelial cells, and we know that endothelial cells are responsive to estrogen. During pregnancy, levels of estrogen are very high. Because of the stimulation by the estrogens, it is thought that these endothelial cells proliferate in large numbers. As a result, they form a growth. Now with time, it may regress or undergo in some cases, but most of the times it needs to be excised, and it is excised, and then it does not reoccur. So this is excessive granulation tissue, and it is known, although it is pyogenic granuloma is a misnomer. It is neither pyogenic, it has nothing to do with the pus, and neither it is granuloma. It is not forming any collection of epithelioid cells, but these older names persist along in literature. So this is actually excessive granulation tissue which forms a mass. Now why are they important? They are not important because of their outcome. They both are important because they can mimic a malignant growth. So many a times we need to exclude through biopsy for any malignancy. Although in this picture they are shown as typical lesions, but they are not always typical, and sometimes they are difficult to differentiate from malignant lesions, and their only significance is that they can mimic malignancy, and sometimes we need to rule out malignancies from these lesions. And now precancerous lesions are of three types. Leukoplakia, we know white patches. Erythroplakia are eroded reddish areas, and a combination of two, that is speckled leukoerythroplakia. Sometimes at some places they are ulcerated, while on other places they are overgrowths and plaques. So it can be a combination of these two as well. Now erythroplakia and leukoplakia are mucosal plaques which may undergo malignant transformation under certain conditions, and that's why they are caused as they are known as precancerous lesions. The risk for malignant transformation is greater in erythroplakia as compared to leukoplakia. We'll see the reason for that tendency. And now leukoplakia is defined. There has been much controversy about the definition of leukoplakia, but now it has been defined by WHO that white patches of the oral mucosa that cannot be scraped off by definition, and that can and those that cannot be characterized as any other disease. If they are part of lichen planus, then they are not leukoplakia, then they are part of lichen planus or pemphigoid or any other systemic disease. We only label a white patch as leukoplakia when we have excluded everything else. So this is called diagnosis of exclusion. So we exclude any other possible thing. We try to scrap it off. We cannot scrap it off. We try to fix it in some other diseases, some systemic diseases. If we fail, then it is labeled as leukoplakia, diagnosis of exclusion. And now it is thought to be associated with tobacco, and anything that is associated with tobacco is more commonly seen in males. So is true for leukoplakia. It is more commonly seen in males. And now histological evaluation of these lesions is important, because up to 5 to 25% of these lesions are dysplastic. In different studies, it has been found that 5 to 25 of those lesions shows some evidence of dysplasia. They are not only increased number of cells, they are not only proliferations. In those 5 to 25% cases, they show features of dysplasia. I will show you features of dysplasia. And when they show features of dysplasia, only then we label leukoplakia as precancerous disorder. If it does not show features of dysplasia, then it is not a precancerous condition. That it will more likely regress or will stay as such. It will not evolve as squamous cell carcinoma. So we look for the presence of dysplasia in biopsies. Now histology of this leukoplakia ranges from orderly epithelial hyperplasia, so epithelial thickening which is orderly, which is normal looking, thickening of the epithelial layers, which is known as acanthosis, thickness of the superficial layer, which is known as keratin layer, is known as hyperkeratosis, and nuclei in the keratin layer. Normally when cells mature in the superficial layers, they lose their nuclei. Because of rapid proliferation, they don't mature enough to exclude their nuclei, and this condition is known as parakeratosis. This all can be without dysplasia, but it can be without varying degree of dysplasia, mild, moderate or severe. And when it shows dysplasia, only then it is a precancerous condition, and only then it needs a follow-up. And now this is a gross appearance of leukoplakia. It is widely variable. And now this is a small white patch with smooth surface with regular borders. This is a more advanced case, probably with rough surface, slightly irregular borders. This is nodular growth, which is ominous. Nodular growth is more likely to progress to malignancy. And this is even roughened surface, which we call it verrucous growth, or wart-like growth, because these structures are, these are the epithelial thickenings which are wart-like. So verrucous growth. So these all can be the presentations, but although it is likely that they are more likely to transform to cancers, but we need to exclude all forms of leukoplakia for the presence of dysplasia. Now this is a microscopic picture. This is normal. This is epidermal layers. Normally they should not be. They are around 10 to 11 to 12 at the most layers. But you can see now in this specimen, they are around more than 20 layers, 20 cell layers. If we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so more than 20. So this is acanthosis. Now you see in the surface layers, normally there should not be any nuclei. There are nuclei in the surface layer. This is parakeratosis. And there is cellular pleomorphism. There the see the size of this cell, compare size of this cell with this cell, with this normal looking cell, and abnormal mitosis. Normally these mitoses are limited to the basal cell layers. Now normally these are limited to the basal cell layers, but now in this case we can see these mitotic figures even in superficial layers. So these are abnormal mitoses, and this is also known as loss of polarity, because normally these basal cells should be in the basal layers. If we find these cells in the superficial layers, these immature cells, if we find in the superficial layers, then this is loss of polarity of the epithelium, because squamous epithelium has a specific arrangement. Basal layers have larger nuclei, superficial layers have smaller nuclei and larger cytoplasms, and surface layers have no nuclei and flattened cytoplasm. When this arrangement is lost, we call it loss of polarity of the epithelium. Now we turn to erythroplakia. And now, as the name indicates, it is erythroplakia, so it is red, and it is velvety because of the epithelial growth, and it appears as if it is eroded, because in this case there is epithelial atrophy, and because of that atrophy, those areas appear depressed as compared to the surrounding mucosa. I'll show you them. It is less common than leukoplakia, but it is more threatening, and it will show erosions, surface ulcerations, dysplasias of varying degrees, carcinoma in situ to even approaching carcinoma in situ, and subepithelial inflammation. And rate of malignant transformation is very high. More than 50% of those having erythroplakia, they develop squamous cell carcinomas. And now this is gross appearance of these reddish areas. Although they look like ulcers, normal looking ulcers, they are depressed and more red than the surrounding mucosa, but they are more chronic and long standing than any inflammatory ulcers. This is another ulcer on the gingival mucosa or hard palate. This is an ulcer. This is on gingival mucosa. So this is a reddened area, and it is, I'll show you morphologically how it appears. Now see, in this case the number of layers are either normal or decreased, but there is no maturation at all whatsoever. The cells in the basal layers are similar to the cells in the superficial layers. So this is epithelial thinning, because this is involving all layers, so this is severe dysplasia. And we also see that this is basement membrane. Below the basement membrane there are a lot of epithelial cells, there are a lot of inflammatory cells and blood vessels. So with thinned epithelium and lots of inflammation and congested blood vessels, these lesions appear reddish. Because of that, they appear red, and because of that, they are labeled as erythroplakia. And now this is again a white plaque on the tongue. It looks like a leukoplakia, but it is slightly different. It is hairy leukoplakia. Only the borders of the tongue are involved, not the center. It only involves border, and it is seen and it is known as hairy leukoplakia, and it is unlike leukoplakia. It is never a pre-malignant condition, but it is seen in a more serious condition, that is in immunocompromised person, and actually more than 80% of those have either HIV or develop AIDS. So it is seen in the patients of AIDS who are immunocompromised, and they are fluffy patches on the lateral borders of the tongue. Microscopically, they are epithelial thickenings like leukoplakia, but they have different features. They have different features and viral info. But unlike oral thrush and like leukoplakia, they cannot be scraped off, and they are actually thought to be caused by EBV infection, Epstein-Barr virus infection. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not a pre-malignant condition. Now, the last but not the least, but rather most important topic is oral cancer. And now most of these oral cancers are squamous cell carcinoma. About 90% of these oral cancers are squamous cell carcinoma, followed by a few adenocarcinomas arising in the salivary glands. So this is actually, when we say oral cancer, we mean because oral cavity is lined by stratified squamous epithelium. At places it is keratinized, and at places it is non-keratinized. So it can be both keratinizing and non-keratinizing squamous cell carcinoma. And it is not rare. It is sixth most common tumor overall. It is sixth most common tumor of humans, and most of them occur in the oral cavity. And now the downside of oral cancer, and of course of all cancers, is that it has a very high mortality. It is less than 50% 5-year survival. We see outcome of cancers in that is known as prognosis in terms of 5-year survival or 10-year survival. Less than 50% 5-year survival is not good for oral cancer, because it is easily accessible and it is easily examinable. So less than 50% 5-year survival, it means less than 50% of the patients of oral cancer will survive after 5 years. And it has been, more importantly, it has been similar since the last 50 years. So despite all the developments in diagnostics, all the developments in therapeutics, the outcome is similar as it was 50 years ago. The reasons are twofold. Number one is the late diagnosis. Although it is present in the oral cavity, but it forms either painless plaques or painless ulcers. Because they are painless, so, and they appear in smokers, as I will show you, they more commonly appear in smokers, so they usually tend to ignore these small ulcers or small plaques, so they are not taken care of in time. So the presentation of these tumors is late, when they are already well advanced. When they are advanced, and you can well imagine the oral cavity, how important structures are surrounding this oral cavity, bones. So when they are advanced, they are difficult to cure, they are difficult to treat surgically, because they then involve important structures surrounding the area. So first thing is late diagnosis. The second thing is These tumors occur in tobacco users, and we now know that this carcinogens in tobacco, they cause genetic changes in almost all cells of that field. So all cells of the oral mucosa and oropharynx and larynx, they will develop some genetic abnormalities. This is called field effect or field cancerization. It is only by chance that some of those foci, they develop into carcinomas. But remember that the remaining mucosa also has accumulated some genetic abnormalities, although not enough to cause to develop as carcinomas, but they have genetic abnormalities. So when you treat one cancer, when you treat one primary, it is likely that a secondary tumor will appear, a second primary will appear, again because the remaining mucosa also has genetic changes. So, and if a patient survives for 5 years, for example, there are 35% chances that he will develop a second primary tumor. Now, the problem with that second primary tumor is that the patient is already undergoing therapy and has been treated or being treated for the first primary. So the second primary is devastating. Now this is lethal, and this caused the mortality. So for that, surveillance for second primaries is important, because when you treat one tumor, there is every chance that the patient can develop a second primary, a second tumor in the oral cavity, and this is because of the field effect or because of the field cancerization. Now, risk factors are tobacco, smoking and chewing heavy, not only smoking. In different parts of the world, tobacco is chewed in the form of betel nuts and things like that, palms. So that is also a very important risk. Heavy alcohol intake, family history of head and neck cancer, leukoplakia and erythroplakia, as I mentioned earlier, and more importantly, HPV oncogenic variant. Now, HPV has various variants. Some of them are oncogenic, dangerous, they can cause tumors, while others do not cause tumors. Now, one variant, that is 16, HPV type 16, is seen now in oropharynx. Like HSV, HPV is also a genital pathogen. Traditionally, it is associated with cervical cancer, and it caused a lot of cervical cancers. I will tell you that story. Cervical carcinoma is a success story. But HPV, because of now changing sexual practices from the genital area, it has now moved to the cancers of oral cavity, and especially the cancers which are deep-seated in the oropharynx, not the oral cavity proper. The cancers of oral cavity proper are more associated with the tobacco, lips and anterior part of the tongue and oral mucosa. But deep-seated tumors around tonsils and soft palate, they are, and this part is known as oropharynx, they are more associated with HPV oncogenic viruses, especially type 16. Now, tobacco and HPV associated cancers have different characteristics. One is the location. Tobacco is associated with oral cavity cancers, while HPV is associated with oropharynx cancers, and prognosis of HPV associated cancers is better. They respond better to therapy, and but it is expected to rise and surpass cervical carcinoma. Now people think that this oncogenic variant, HPV oncogenic caused carcinoma, will rise because of changing sexual practices, and as a result it may surpass cervical carcinoma. Now, cervical carcinoma was the most common female tumor, but two factors resulted in decreasing the incidence of cervical carcinoma. First is screening method. Can be screened And now cervical epithelium sheds off, and it can be taken from the vagina, and then it is stained through pap smears, and then if dysplastic cells were found, these patients were followed and treated accordingly. So first it was the screening or surveillance, and the second was the HPV vaccine. In females now, in many developed countries, HPV vaccine is in routine use. That has resulted in a decline in cervical carcinoma. Now we hope that with the use of HPV vaccine in both males and females, this carcinoma will be prevented in them. Now this is the evolution of squamous cell carcinoma. Now these are 3 rows. One is showing evolution of genetic changes, other is showing evolution in the microscopic changes, and the uppermost is showing changes as seen in the gross appearance. So as we know, cancers are genetic abnormalities. So genetic abnormalities accumulate over time, and as they accumulate, these morphological changes follow. So a normal stratified squamous epithelium, you can see hyperplasia and hyperkeratosis with accumulation of like P21 and P16 and 3P. These are tumor suppressor genes, mutations, inactivations. I think by you still can recall these tumor suppressor genes, oncogenes, proto-oncogenes. So these are the genes which are involved in carcinogenesis. So with the accumulation of further mutations, now dysplasia develops, and you can see now instead of white patch, now there is a nodular growth. Over time, this dysplasia, which is limited to the lower level, lower layers, it is mild dysplasia, mild to moderate. Now it is involving all the layers. Now it is known as severe dysplasia or carcinoma in situ. Now with time, some of these cells, they penetrate the basement membrane, and when they penetrate the basement membrane, we call it squamous cell carcinoma. The only difference between carcinoma in situ and severe dysplasia is that dysplastic cells are limited by the basement membrane. When these cells penetrate this basement membrane, this is squamous cell carcinoma. Now gross morphology, they can be anywhere in the oral mucosa, lips, ventral surface of the tongue, floor of the mouth. Appearance, they appear as either white plaques, bulging masses that then these masses can ulcerate. Now morphologically, microscopically, they are well differentiated to anaplastic. Now we identify them with the formation of keratin. If they form keratin, because normal function of epithelial cells is formation of keratin. If they keep forming keratin, we label them well differentiated. And they show microscope. I will show you pleomorphic squamoid cells, keratin pearls, prominent intracellular bridges. I'll show you in next slides. And the spread is, early spread is towards the cervical lymph nodes. Depending on the site in the oral cavity, the spread to the cervical lymph nodes varies. And the mediastinal lymph nodes, lungs, liver, and bones are the sites for distant metastasis. Now this is, you can see a growth on the, I think, ventral surface of the tongue. Now this is the growth. The surface of this growth is now ulcerated. This is typical appearance of carcinoma. Now you can see microscopically, this is epithelium which is showing dysplasia, but this is limited by the basement membrane. In this area, these malignant cells are now invading into the muscles. These are the muscles, tongue muscles. Now they are invading into the muscles, and because if they grow normally towards the surface, they lose keratin, but when they grow inwards, they cannot lose their keratin, and these keratins are then these keratin particles then form whorls, and because these whorls shine under the microscope, we call them keratin pearls because they shine. Now what is this structure? This is, you all know, and you should never forget, for at least for your undergraduate studies, For you, this is squamous cell carcinoma. Usually it is when squamous cell carcinoma is given to you, it is given with a keratin pearl. So this is a keratin pearl. So this is a keratin whorl which shines under the microscope. That's why it is. And you can also see all these plastic cells. What is this feature? What are these features? Compare this cell size with this cell size. So these cells are hyperchromatic, very dark. They are pleomorphic. They vary in size and shape. So they are pleomorphic, hyperchromatic. This is a mitotic figure. So there is mitosis and prominent intracellular bridges. These are also known as desmosomes. So these are actually, it is showing all the features of malignancy. Now summary. Aphthous ulcers are self-limited, shallow, painful and recurrent, are common in young females. And leukoplakia are white patches that cannot be scraped off and cannot be characterized as any other disease. They are associated with use of tobacco. Histological evaluation is important because these plastic lesions are precancerous. Erythroplakia is more threatening than leukoplakia. Rate of malignant transformation is very high. A vast majority of oral cavity cancers are squamous cell carcinomas. They are associated with tobacco and alcohol. HPV associated lesions are on the rise and have better prognosis. And usually they are diagnosed late, and they may have multiple primary tumors due to field cancerization, leading to their poor prognosis. These are if you want to read, these are if you want to read Robbins' Basic Pathology is your reference book. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, Dr. Mais, if they let me know if they have any questions.
Doctor, they can send you on the chat, and if students have any questions, they should send you an email.
You need to memorize the genes of you. Don't need to memorize the genes of squamous cell carcinoma. The only important thing is that you understand the concept that this is a genetic abnormality, and genetic abnormalities accumulate over time. In some cancers, when one or two genes are always mutated, there can be some questions but it is not the case with oral cancer.
Yes, doctor, I have just a question that it's not related to the session.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't understand the idea, why we was at the middle of the session, blocked from sending any question to each other. I believe since it's just online, and at least since we are online, we need a little bit kind of communication, to live like we are in the area, of studying. But if you are, trying to block us from looking for each other question and to communicate, that will not be any functional or significant for each other. I mean, as a student, as a whole student. I didn't understand why we were blocked at the middle from asking a question and seeing each other question.
I don't know. What are you talking?
Thank you very much for your. Sorry, doctor. Yes, thank you very much for your insightful comment. Actually, it was administratively, they told us that we shouldn't actually prevent the communication between the students just because there have been some unprofessional behavior. This should have been from the beginning of the session, but I noticed that it was open in the middle. If you have any other questions, you can email me.
Yeah, but I'm not sure, but who I can contact to see and about that rule,
Your BLCs
actually.
And by the way, you can communicate through, even during lecture, you can communicate through WhatsApp and other chats groups. They are not blocked. I am not aware of what is, but obviously if we are in a group, morally, we are bound to talk to everybody.
Yeah, but I believe
but I understand.
Yeah, but I believe.
Okay, we will sort it out. We will sort it out. No issues. Just relax. Now I want to answer some questions. Doctor, can you please repeat the secondary cancer? So secondary, now there are 2-3 terms. One is primary, the second is second primary. Another term is secondaries. Now primary is any tumor, any first tumor arising in any area is a primary tumor. Now when we say secondaries, sometimes we mean metastatic sites of the tumor. That is, these sites are known as secondary sites. But when we say second primary, we mean that the original tumor was treated or cured, and now a second tumor has grown up. So that is a second primary. It is different from recurrence. There can be recurrence. Recurrence is the appearance of the same cancer which is under treatment. So if that appears, this is a recurrence of the tumor. But sometimes when one cancer is completely treated, a second cancer appears. Then we call it a second primary. So you need to differentiate between a primary tumor, a recurrence, a second primary, and secondaries. Secondaries are metastasis. Second primary is a second new tumor. Recurrence is reappearance of the same tumor. So these are different terms. Thank you for asking that. Polymorphism. Someone asked polymorphism. In what context? So polymorphism is basically genetic polymorphism. Our population has different types of different alleles of a single gene. That is polymorphism. I don't know. Did I say something like polymorphism? I don't recall. Dysplastic cells are the cells which are abnormal looking cells. They are like immature cells, like basal cells. If they are in the basal cell layers, it is their normal place. So they should look basal cell. If they appear in the surface layers and they should be mature in these surface layers and they are not mature there, we call them dysplastic cells. Now desmosomes are the same intracellular bridges. Now when they are prominent between the cells, there are bridges, desmosomes, and these bridges are formed by desmosomes. So these are the desmosomes. Pleomorphic is, I will talk about pleomorphic adenoma next time in my next. Pleomorphic, pleo means multiple, morphic means shapes. So any tumor which has multiple morphologies in one or two areas, it is pleomorphic. I will talk about. Mitosis is proliferation. Keratin, did I say keratin? C-R-A-T-I-N, I don't know. Keratin pearls, yes, it is keratin pearl. It is not keratin, it is keratin pearl. It is the whorls of keratin which are seen in squamous cell carcinoma. These are known as keratin pearls. Now, is there the same field? Is that the same as field carcerization? Is an effect. The genetic change occur in many cells of that area. That is field effect or field cancerization. And the second primaries occur because of field cancerization at the same place, in the same area. It is not exactly the same place. It is, if it is in the oral cavity, then it is a second primary. Okay, any more questions? I think I answered all the questions which were visible to me. But if you have any more questions, you are always welcome. You can ask me questions through email. You can ask me questions through WhatsApp. You can ask me questions whatever way you like in my office. Thank you very much. See you soon, inshallah.